They say vengeance is sweetest when served cold. But Alina preferred hers with champagne, beneath glittering chandeliers, at the luxury wedding of her ex-husband. He stood beaming, wrapped in designer smugness, making grand toasts about his shiny new life. In his mind, he'd won. He'd replaced her, forgotten her. What he didn't notice was the man beside her, the one he'd written off as a rebound no one would remember. But that nobody was about to rewrite the entire evening and turn the wedding of the year into the scandal of the decade. Because when the past crashes into the present, someone's future might just go up in flames. The invitation arrived on a Tuesday, nestled between a bill for the utilities on her modest LA apartment and a postcard from a friend traveling through Bali. It was thick, creamy cardstock, the kind of paper that felt unapologetically expensive. Embossed in gold calligraphy that swirled with arrogant perfection were the names Marcus Thorne and Sabrina Sterling. Below them, the date and the location, the Grand Californian Hotel, a place synonymous with old money and extravagant declarations of love. Alina Taylor let her fingers trace the raised lettering. Marcus Thorne, her ex-husband. The name still felt like a phantom limb, a part of her that was gone but occasionally ached with the memory of its presence. They had been divorced for 2 years, a messy, soul-crushing affair that had left her feeling like a hollowed-out version of herself. He had initiated it, of course. Their 7-year marriage, which she had thought was a partnership, had, in his eyes, become a liability. He was a man on the rise, a junior partner at a prestigious downtown law firm, and she, a freelance graphic designer who worked from home in yoga pants, just didn't fit his ascending narrative anymore. "We've grown apart," he had said, the words sterile and rehearsed. "I'm on a different trajectory now. I need someone who can keep up." The someone, she later found out, was Sabrina Sterling, heiress to a hotel fortune. A woman whose life was a curated collection of charity galas, equestrian events, and summers in the Hamptons. She was everything Alina wasn't: polished, pedigreed, and powerfully connected. The news of their relationship had been a gut punch, confirming every insecurity Marcus had so expertly cultivated in her over the years, that she wasn't smart enough, ambitious enough, or beautiful enough, that she was, in the end, replaceable. Now, holding the invitation, a wave of nausea rolled over her. Why had he sent it? It felt less like an olive branch and more like a final public declaration of his victory, a command performance for her own humiliation. He wanted her to witness it, to see him standing at the altar, with his perfect bride in their perfect venue, cementing a life she was never good enough for. It was a power play, pure and simple. Classic Marcus. Her first instinct was to burn it, to watch the ostentatious gold lettering curl into black ash and flush it down the toilet. She pictured herself RSVPing no with a defiant flourish, scribbling a message she wouldn't have the guts to actually send. "Sorry, I'm busy that day, washing my hair and reclaiming my soul." She tossed the invitation onto her small kitchen counter, the heavy cardstock landing with a soft thud that echoed the sinking feeling in her stomach. For 2 days, it sat there, a silent, taunting presence. She tried to ignore it, burying herself in work. But her focus was shattered. Every client email, every design brief seemed to mock her. She was designing logos for small businesses, while her ex-husband was merging his life with a corporate dynasty. It was during a late-night call with her best friend Zoe that the idea began to shift. "Just don't go," Zoe said, her voice a comforting balm over the phone. "Why would you put yourself through that? Let him have his smug little party. You don't owe him an audience." "I know," Alina sighed, swirling a cheap glass of red wine and staring at the LA city lights from her small balcony. "But a part of me feels like if I don't go, he'll think I'm hiding, that I'm so broken I can't even face him. He'll tell people I couldn't handle it. He'll win. It's not a competition, Alina. With Marcus, everything is a competition, she countered. The silence on the other end of the line was an acknowledgement. Zoe had been there through the whole ugly divorce. She'd seen Marcus's casual cruelty firsthand. Okay, Zoe said slowly. So, what's the alternative? You go, you watch him get married, you eat some dry chicken, and you cry in the bathroom. That's not winning. That's torture. Alina didn't have an answer, but the conversation planted a seed. What if she didn't go alone? What if she didn't go as the sad, abandoned ex-wife? What if she rewrote the role he had assigned her? The thought was terrifying, but also electrifying. It was a spark in the darkness that had enveloped her for 2 years. The next day, she thought about who she could ask. Her male friends were all too close to the situation. They hated Marcus with a fiery passion that would be impossible to conceal. A casual date would see right through the charade. She needed someone different, someone who was so far removed from her world that he would be entirely unreadable. That's when she thought of Nathan. Nathan Vance. He was a client, but not a typical one. He had commissioned her to design a series of intricate logos for a portfolio of boutique eco-lodges he was developing in Costa Rica. Their interactions had been entirely virtual, a series of professional, polite, and surprisingly insightful emails and video calls. He was based in London, though he seemed to be constantly on the move. His profile picture was unassuming, a man in his late 30s with kind eyes, a warm smile, and a hint of silver at his temples that suggested a quiet wisdom. He was articulate, paid his invoices on time, and his feedback was always constructive and respectful. A stark contrast to the belittling critiques Marcus used to level at her work. He was a complete stranger in her personal life. The perfect blank slate. The idea was insane. She knew it was insane. Asking a client you've never met in person to fly from London to Los Angeles to pose as your date at your ex-husband's wedding was the plot of a bad romantic comedy. She typed out the email 3 times, deleting it each time, her heart hammering against her ribs. It was unprofessional. It was desperate. It was career suicide. On the 4th try, fueled by another glass of cheap wine and a surge of what the hell defiance, she hit send. She kept it brief and brutally honest, framing it as a highly unconventional proposition. She explained the situation with her ex-husband, the power dynamics at play, and what his presence would mean. She offered to pay for his flight and accommodation, of course, and a generous fee for his time, framing it as a consultation on brand-adjacent social strategy. A piece of corporate jargon she was sure Marcus would have been proud of. She shut her laptop immediately, convinced she had just torched her best client relationship. She wouldn't hear from him, or worse, she'd get a polite, pitying email declining the proposition and subtly terminating their professional contract. She spent the night tossing and turning, her dreams a chaotic montage of gilded invitations and disapproving client faces. The reply came less than 24 hours later. The subject line was simply, a highly unconventional proposition. Alina's hand trembled as she opened it. Dear Alina, thank you for your candid and intriguing email. It is, without a doubt, the most interesting proposal I have received this year. I believe in good design, and I believe in bold choices. This feels like both. I also have a personal policy of never letting a bully win. I happen to have business in California around that time. Consider your proposition accepted. No fee required, but I will take you up on the flight. My assistant will be in touch to coordinate the details. Think of it as a field study in human dynamics. It sounds far more interesting than my scheduled meetings. Warmly, Nathan. Alina read the email 5 times. A slow, disbelieving smile spread across her face. It was actually happening. Nathan Vance was coming to LA. And suddenly, for the first time in 2 years, The thought of going to Marcus's wedding didn't fill her with dread. It filled her with a thrilling, terrifying, and utterly delicious sense of possibility. She walked over to the invitation on her counter, picked it up, and with a steady hand, checked the box for "Will attend, +1." The week leading up to the wedding was a blur of nervous energy. Elena bought a dress, a deep emerald green silk gown that was more elegant and daring than anything she'd ever owned. It was a statement, a silent rebellion against the beige, inoffensive woman she had been when she was with Marcus. Zoe helped her with hair and makeup, transforming her into a sleeker, more confident version of herself. "You look like a queen," Zoe had said, stepping back to admire her handiwork. "Not a sad, divorced graphic designer, a queen who owns a goddamn country." Elena had laughed, but the sentiment stuck. Tonight, she wasn't Marcus's discarded wife. She was the queen of her own newly discovered country. Nathan arrived the day before the wedding. He'd suggested they meet for a drink to align their narrative, as he'd put it in his email. She chose a quiet, dimly lit bar in a boutique hotel downtown, a place she felt sure they wouldn't run into anyone from her old life. She saw him before he saw her. He was taller than she'd imagined, dressed in a simple but impeccably tailored gray suit that spoke of quiet luxury. He moved with an easy, unhurried grace that commanded attention without demanding it. When he spotted her, the warm smile from his profile picture materialized, and it was even more disarming in person. "Elena," he said, his voice a smooth, calm baritone with a soft British accent. "It's a true pleasure to finally meet you in person. You look stunning." There was no awkwardness. He shook her hand, his grip firm and reassuring, and slid into the booth opposite her. "Thank you for doing this, Nathan," she said, her voice a little shaky. "Seriously, you have no idea how much—" "I think I have some idea," he interrupted gently, "and you have nothing to thank me for. As I said, I have a strict anti-bully policy. And from what you've told me, Mr. Thorne sounds like he's in need of a lesson in humility." They spent 2 hours talking. He was an incredible listener, asking insightful questions about her life, her work, and her marriage to Marcus. She found herself opening up in a way she hadn't with anyone else, the story of her divorce pouring out of her not as a tragedy, but as a case study. He, in turn, shared stories of his travels, of building his business from the ground up, of the challenges and triumphs of creating something meaningful. He was charming, intelligent, and funny, with a dry wit that made her laugh more than she had in years. He never once made her feel foolish for her audacious request. Instead, he treated it like a brilliant strategic move. "So, what's our story?" she asked, feeling a renewed sense of confidence. "Simple is best," he said, leaning forward slightly. "We met through work. We found we had a shared passion for design and ethical business. We've been seeing each other for a few months. I'm in town for business, and you graciously invited me to be your date. We are quiet, happy, and entirely uninterested in the drama. The best way to command a room is to act as if you've already forgotten you're in it." The day of the wedding, a black town car arranged by Nathan picked her up. He was waiting for her in the lobby of his hotel, holding a small, elegant bouquet of white orchids. "A little accessory for the queen," he said with a wink. As they pulled up to the opulent entrance of the Grand Californian, Elena's heart began to pound. The valet was swarmed with luxury cars, Porsches, Bentleys, Teslas. Guests in designer gowns and tuxedos drifted up the grand staircase. This was Marcus's world now, a world designed to intimidate. "Ready?" Nathan asked, placing a hand gently on her arm. His touch was grounding. "As I'll ever be," she breathed. He smiled. "Just follow my lead. And remember, you hold all the cards." They walked in, and the effect was immediate. The lobby was a sea of familiar faces from her past life. Marcus's colleagues, his family. their mutual friends who had quietly sided with him after the divorce. Conversation stuttered to a halt. Heads turned. Eyes widened. Elena, who had always been the mousy, quiet wife in the background, was now a vision in emerald silk on the arm of a handsome, impeccably dressed stranger who radiated an aura of quiet power. She spotted Marcus's mother, Victoria, first, a formidable woman with a helmet of perfectly coiffed blonde hair and a disdain for anyone without a trust fund. Her face, which was usually set in a mask of polite condescension, was a picture of slack-jawed shock. She looked from Elena to Nathan and back again, her mind clearly racing to compute this unexpected variable. Then they saw Marcus. He was standing near the entrance to the ballroom, holding court with a group of his groomsmen, a smug, triumphant grin plastered on his face. He was in his element, the king in his castle. When he saw her, his grin faltered for a fraction of a second. His eyes swept over her dress, her hair, and then landed on Nathan. She saw the flicker of confusion, then annoyance, then pure, undiluted ego. He couldn't stand that she wasn't there alone and miserable. He strode towards them, his fiancée Sabrina, a vision in white lace, trailing in his wake. "Elena," he said, his voice dripping with false sincerity. "I'm so glad you could make it. I wasn't sure you would." The subtext was clear. "I'm surprised you had the nerve." "Marcus," Elena said, her voice cool and steady, a stark contrast to the frantic beating of her heart. "I wouldn't have missed it. Congratulations." Marcus's eyes flickered to Nathan, a dismissive, appraising look. "And you are?" he asked, not bothering to offer a handshake. "Nathan Vance," Nathan said, his voice calm and level. He extended a hand, forcing Marcus to take it. "A friend of Elena's. It's a beautiful venue. You have excellent taste." The compliment was delivered so smoothly it was almost impossible to detect the subtle irony, but Elena felt it. Marcus, who prided himself on his supposed sophistication, was being outclassed, and he knew it. Sabrina, sensing the tension, stepped forward with a dazzling, if slightly forced, smile. "Elena, hi, it's so brave of you to come. We're just so thrilled to have you here to share our special day." Brave. The word hung in the air, a perfectly aimed, velvet-gloved insult. Before Elena could respond, Nathan gave her arm a gentle squeeze. "We're the ones who are thrilled," he said, his smile never wavering as he looked directly at Sabrina. "Love is always worth celebrating, isn't that right, darling?" He looked at Elena, his eyes crinkling at the corners. The darling was a masterstroke. It was intimate, casual, and utterly convincing. It staked a claim, drawing a line in the sand. Elena wasn't just here with a date. She was here with her darling. Marcus's jaw tightened. He had expected a ghost at the feast, a sad specter of his past life to serve as a backdrop for his glorious future. He had not expected this. He had not expected her to arrive with a man who looked like he could buy and sell the entire hotel without breaking a sweat. A man who looked at Elena not with pity, but with genuine admiration. The grand entrance was over. They had survived the initial confrontation. But as they walked into the ballroom, a cavernous space dripping with crystals and white roses, Elena knew the night was just beginning. The first battle had been won. But the war of perception was far from over. The wedding ceremony was a lavish affair, as ostentatious as Elena had expected. It took place in a garden under a canopy of twinkling fairy lights, with a string quartet playing softly. Sabrina glided down the aisle, looking every bit the princess bride, and Marcus stood at the altar, looking like a man who had just closed the most important deal of his life. Elena watched, feeling a strange sense of detachment, as if she were observing a scene from a movie. The pain she had expected to feel was muted, replaced by a cool, analytical calm. Nathan's presence beside her was a silent anchor in the sea of her past. He didn't hold her hand or offer platitudes. He simply sat there, his quiet strength a shield against the ghosts of her marriage. The real performance, however, began at the reception. The ballroom was breathtaking, with towering floral centerpieces and a custom monogrammed dance floor. The air buzzed with the clinking of champagne glasses and the self-congratulatory chatter of LA's elite. Alina and Nathan were seated at a table in the back, a clear, deliberate snub from Marcus and his mother. They were placed with distant cousins and a few of Sabrina's less important friends. It was meant to be an insult, a relegation to the B-list of their lives. Nathan, however, seemed to find it amusing. "The best view of the theater is from the back row," he murmured to her as they sat down, a twinkle in his eye. The dinner was punctuated by a series of fawning toasts. Marcus's best man, a fellow lawyer named Matthew, spoke glowingly of Marcus's ambition and drive. Sabrina's father, a gruff, imposing man, welcomed Marcus to the Sterling family and spoke of merging not just their families, but their assets. Every speech was a variation on the same theme: wealth, power, and status. It was a celebration not of love, but of a successful acquisition. Alina picked at her sea bass, feeling the weight of the room's collective judgment. She could feel the curious glances, hear the whispered conversations. Is that his ex-wife? Who is that man with her? She looked surprisingly good. Then it was Marcus's turn. He stood up, tapping a fork against his crystal glass, a broad, self-satisfied smile on his face. He held Sabrina's hand, lifting it to his lips to kiss her diamond-encrusted fingers. The room fell silent, hanging on his every word. "Wow," he began, his voice booming through the sound system. "Just wow. Look at my wife." He beamed at Sabrina, who blushed prettily. "Am I the luckiest man in the world, or what?" A round of applause and cheers. "I want to thank you all for being here," he continued, his gaze sweeping the room. "Our friends, our family. This day is the start of the rest of my life. A better life. A life I've worked damn hard for." His eyes, for a brief, calculated moment, flickered towards Alina's table. It was a tiny, almost imperceptible gesture, but she felt it like a physical blow. He was talking about her. He was framing their marriage as the before to his glorious after. "Sabrina has shown me what it means to have a true partner," he went on, his voice thick with performative emotion. "Someone who inspires you, who pushes you, who shares your vision for the future. We're not just starting a marriage today, we're building an empire." He then launched into a detailed, cringe-worthy monologue about their future plans. He bragged about the house they were building in Beverly Hills, a monstrosity of glass and steel with a 14-car garage. He talked about their honeymoon, a 3-week, no-expense-spared tour of the most exclusive resorts in the South Pacific, starting with a private bungalow over the water in Bora Bora. "Only the best for my Sab," he said, puffing out his chest. "She deserves the world, and I'm going to give it to her." It was a masterclass in narcissistic gloating, disguised as a romantic speech. He was rubbing everyone's face in his success, but his words were aimed squarely at one person. He was twisting the knife, making sure she understood just how much better his life was without her. Alina felt the old, familiar shame creep in, the feeling of being small and insignificant that he had been so good at instilling in her. She instinctively looked down at her plate, wanting to disappear, but then she felt a gentle pressure on her knee. It was Nathan's hand, a brief, firm touch. She looked up at him. He wasn't looking at her. His gaze was fixed on Marcus, his expression unreadable. There was no anger, no pity, just a quiet, intense focus, like a chess master watching his opponent make a foolish, predictable move. The silent gesture was all she needed. It was a reminder. You are not that person anymore. He has no power over you. She lifted her chin, met Marcus's gaze across the room, and held it. She didn't smile. She didn't scowl. She simply looked at him, her expression neutral, calm, and unmoved. She would not give him the satisfaction of seeing her crumble. Marcus, seeing his verbal arrow had missed its mark, faltered for a second before wrapping up his speech with a final, booming toast to himself and his bride. As he sat down, the room erupted in applause. The band started playing, and the happy couple moved to the dance floor for their first dance. The rest of the evening passed in a haze of forced pleasantries. People from her old life drifted by their table, their curiosity getting the better of them. They offered awkward greetings, their eyes darting between Alina and Nathan, trying to piece together the puzzle. Marcus's mother, Victoria, was the most direct. She swooped in while Nathan was away getting them drinks, her smile as sharp as broken glass. "Alina, dear," she said, her eyes cataloging every detail of Alina's dress. "It's been a while. You're looking... well?" The word was loaded as if her well-being was a surprising and slightly inconvenient development. "Victoria," Alina replied, her voice even. "It's a beautiful wedding." "Yes, isn't it? Marcus and Sabrina have such exquisite taste. They're a perfect match. A power couple?" She paused, her gaze flicking towards the bar where Nathan was waiting. "And who is your friend? Is he in business?" The question was a thinly veiled inquiry into his net worth. "His name is Nathan," Alina said simply. "And yes, you could say that." Before Victoria could probe further, Nathan returned, handing Alina a glass of champagne. He nodded politely at Victoria. "Mrs. Thorne, I was just admiring the floral arrangements. Spectacular." Victoria, momentarily disarmed by his charm and his direct address, could only muster a tight smile. "Yes, well, Sabrina's father has a connection." She was clearly flustered, unable to place him in her carefully constructed social hierarchy. Nathan was an anomaly, a variable she couldn't account for, and it unnerved her. She made a hasty retreat, muttering something about needing to speak to the caterer. "She seems lovely," Nathan said dryly as he sat down. Alina let out a small laugh, the tension finally breaking. "She's the reason Marcus is the way he is." "Ah, the source code," he nodded, taking a sip of his drink. "That explains a great deal." They watched as Marcus and Sabrina worked the room, soaking in the adoration, the picture of perfect happiness. But knowing Marcus as she did, Alina could see the cracks in the facade. She saw the way his eyes kept darting back to their table, the slight persistent frown that creased his brow whenever he looked at them. He had orchestrated this entire event to be his coronation, and the presence of his supposedly broken ex-wife, looking radiant and happy with a confident, mysterious man, was a discordant note in his symphony of success. The ticking bomb of Marcus's ego was primed, and as the night wore on, fueled by expensive champagne and the adulation of the crowd, Alina had a feeling it was only a matter of time before it went off. She just didn't realize that the person holding the detonator wasn't Marcus. It was the quiet, unassuming man sitting right next to her. The explosion came, as they always did with Marcus, when he felt his spotlight was dimming. The cake had been cut, a towering 8-tiered confection that probably cost more than Alina's car. The band was playing a generic, upbeat pop song, and the dance floor was filled with slightly drunk guests. Marcus, never one to let an opportunity for a monologue pass him by, grabbed the microphone from the band's lead singer. "Hey everyone, can I have your attention for just one more minute?" He slurred slightly, a sheen of sweat on his forehead. Sabrina clung to his arm, looking a little weary of her husband's constant need for an audience. "I just want to say, from the bottom of my heart," he began, his voice echoing through the ballroom, "that this has been the best day of my life." He paused for effect. "And it's only going to get better. Tomorrow, my beautiful wife and I," he gestured grandly to Sabrina, "are heading off to Bora Bora. Private jet, of course, a little gift from my new father-in-law." He winked at Sabrina's father, who beamed with pride. "And we want everyone here to have just as amazing a time on their own honeymoons or You know, just a regular vacation for those of you who are already hitched." He chuckled, and a few of his groomsmen whooped in support. It was a clumsy, arrogant attempt at being magnanimous, but it was really just another way to brag about his own good fortune. He then looked with laser-like focus directly at Alina's table. The smile on his face was pure, unadulterated malice. "Even you, Alina," he said, the entire room turning to stare at her. "I hope your friend can take you somewhere nice. Maybe a weekend in Santa Barbara? I hear it's lovely this time of year." The insult was breathtaking in its cruelty. He was publicly mocking her, reducing her and Nathan to a cheap imitation of his own extravagant life. The comparison, his private jet to Bora Bora versus a hypothetical weekend trip up the coast, was designed to humiliate her on the grandest scale possible. The air in the room grew thick with tension. Guests shifted uncomfortably. Alina felt a hot flush of shame creep up her neck, her hands clenched into fists in her lap. This was it, the final public execution. She was about to stand up to do what? She wasn't sure. Throw her drink at him? Scream? Simply walk out with her head held high? But before she could move, Nathan placed a hand on her arm, a silent command to stay seated. Then he stood up. He didn't move with aggression. He simply rose to his feet, with the same unhurried grace he'd shown all evening. He was a head taller than most of the men in the room, and his quiet presence instantly commanded more attention than Marcus's drunken shouting. Marcus, stunned that someone had dared to interrupt his moment, stared at him. "Can I help you, pal?" Nathan smiled, a calm, almost gentle expression. "You can," he said, his voice, even without a microphone, carrying across the silent room with perfect clarity. "First, I'd like to congratulate you. It was a beautiful ceremony." Marcus looked flustered. This wasn't the reaction he'd expected. Thanks." "Secondly," Nathan continued, his gaze sweeping across the room before landing back on Marcus, "I'd like to apologize. I'm afraid my friend here," he gestured to Alina, "has been a little remiss in her introductions." He then turned slightly to address the entire room. "Good evening, everyone. For those I haven't had the pleasure of meeting, my name is Nathan Vance." A few polite, confused murmurs. The name meant nothing to most of them. But then Nathan's eyes found Sabrina's father, the hotel magnate, Mr. Sterling. "Mr. Sterling," Nathan said, giving a slight, respectful nod. "A pleasure to see you again. I hope you're well." Mr. Sterling, who had been looking on with bored amusement, suddenly sat bolt upright. His eyes widened, a flicker of recognition, then shock dawning on his face. "Vance," he said, his voice a low rumble of disbelief. "Nathan Vance, of the Vance Development Group?" A wave of whispers rippled through the room. Vance Development Group wasn't just a company, it was a global empire of luxury hotels, resorts, and exclusive properties. They were the gold standard, the name that made even old money like the Sterlings sit up and take notice. Nathan Vance wasn't just a businessman, he was the businessman, a man who bought and sold places like the Grand Californian for fun. Nathan gave a modest smile. "The very same. I must say, you've done a wonderful job with the renovations on your Paris property. We were very impressed." Mr. Sterling was speechless. He looked at Nathan, then at Alina, then back at Nathan, the cogs in his powerful brain spinning furiously. Marcus stood there, microphone in hand, his face a mask of utter confusion. He looked from his new father-in-law to Nathan, completely failing to grasp the magnitude of what was happening. "Wait, you two know each other?" Nathan finally turned his attention back to Marcus, his expression now holding a hint of pity. "We do. And that brings me to my third point. Your honeymoon." He paused, letting the silence stretch. "Bora Bora is lovely. I know the resort well. In fact, my company owns it." A collective gasp went through the ballroom. It was a sonic boom of shock and realization. Marcus's jaw literally dropped. The microphone slipped slightly in his sweaty hand. "And while I'm sure you and your lovely bride will have a wonderful time," Nathan continued, his voice as smooth as silk, "you mentioned that you wanted everyone here to have an amazing honeymoon as well. And I think that is a wonderfully generous idea." He looked around the room, making eye contact with the stunned guests. "I was so moved by the sentiment, in fact, that I'd like to help make it a reality." He reached into the inside pocket of his suit jacket and pulled out a sleek black checkbook. "On behalf of myself and my wonderful partner, Alina," he said, his eyes finding hers and giving her a warm, reassuring smile that made her heart skip a beat, "we would like to offer a gift to all of the happy couples here tonight." He clicked a pen. "As a wedding gift, we will be paying for every single one of your honeymoons. All of you." Silence. Pin drop. Absolute silence. The band had stopped playing. The bartenders had stopped pouring. Every single person in the room was frozen, staring at Nathan as if he had just announced he was from another planet. "My assistant," Nathan said calmly, as if he were discussing the weather, "will be by the gift table to take down your names and preferred destinations. Any hotel, any resort, anywhere in the world that is part of the Vance portfolio, and I assure you your options are extensive, is at your disposal for 3 weeks. All expenses paid." He finished with a flourish. Looking directly at Marcus, the smug, arrogant groom who had tried to belittle Alina. "So please," Nathan finished, his voice resonating with quiet, unassailable power, "enjoy, and do send us a postcard." He then calmly sat back down, took Alina's hand in his, and brought it to his lips for a soft kiss, a gesture of profound intimacy and solidarity. The room remained silent for a beat longer, and then it erupted, not into applause, but into a chaotic cacophony of excited chatter, disbelief, and frantic whispering. Guests were on their feet, looking at each other, at Marcus, at Nathan, and at Alina. The snubbed B-list table in the back had suddenly become the center of the universe. Marcus stood frozen on the stage, his face pale and slack. The microphone hung limply at his side. He looked like he had been physically struck. His grand gesture, his moment of supreme triumph, had not only been hijacked, it had been utterly and completely annihilated by a gesture so extravagant, so impossibly grand, that it made his own bragging look like child's play. He had tried to mock Alina with a weekend in Santa Barbara, and her pity date had just bought the entire room a trip to paradise. The bomb had gone off, and the fallout was going to be spectacular. The silence that followed Nathan's words was not empty. It was a physical entity, a vacuum that sucked all the air and giddy energy out of the ballroom. For 3 full seconds, 500 people were united in a single, shared state of suspended disbelief. Alina saw it on their faces. The frozen smiles of the bridesmaids, the bartenders holding bottles mid-pour, the bewildered expression on the band leader's face. Sabrina's hand was still linked in Marcus's arm, but her perfectly painted smile had become a brittle, fragile mask, her eyes wide with a dawning panic. Then the vacuum collapsed, and chaos rushed in. It wasn't a slow build. It was an explosion. A roar of excited, incredulous chatter erupted, a tidal wave of sound that crashed through the room. The carefully curated atmosphere of opulent decorum evaporated, replaced by the frenetic energy of a stock market trading floor. People were on their feet, turning to their neighbors, their faces alight with greedy, golden possibility. "Did he say any resort?" A woman shrieked near their table, grabbing her husband's arm. "Henry, we're going to the Seychelles." "Forget the Seychelles. I'm thinking the Swiss Alps," he shot back, his eyes gleaming. The B-list table, once an island of social exile, was now the epicenter of the earthquake. A crowd began to form, a magnetic pull drawing guests from every corner of the ballroom. Alina watched, dazed, as Marcus's own colleagues, men who had clapped him on the back moments earlier, now pushed past each other for a better view of Nathan, their expressions a mixture of awe and envy. From the corner of her eye, Alina saw a woman in a severe black dress materialize at the gift table. She was sharp, efficient, and moved with a military precision that instantly cut through the chaos. Nathan's assistant. She opened a sleek tablet, its screen glowing in the dim light, and a calm, authoritative voice sliced through the nearest pocket of noise. "If you could please form an orderly queue, I will be happy to take down your details. Please have your preferred destination and travel dates in mind." This woman, this sudden appearance of sheer competence, made Nathan's promise breathtakingly real. This wasn't a drunken, grandstanding gesture. It was a logistical operation already in motion. Across the room, Alina saw Mr. Sterling, the patriarch, moving with purpose. He ignored his daughter, who was now frantically whispering at a stone-faced Marcus. He ignored his wife, who was fanning herself dramatically. He strode through the parting crowd like a shark, his eyes fixed on one target. He stopped before their table, the remaining guests falling silent in his wake. "Vance," he said, the single word a command for attention. His voice was a low growl of respect and calculation. "That was a hell of a play." Nathan inclined his head, the picture of calm amidst the storm. "Just a wedding gift, Charles. One should always be generous on such happy occasions." The use of Sterling's first name was a subtle but clear signal of their equal footing. Sterling's eyes narrowed. He wasn't here for pleasantries. "My son-in-law," he said, the term dripping with newfound contempt, "is clearly out of his depth. He doesn't understand the landscape he's playing on." He gave Alina a long, hard look, a complete reevaluation taking place behind his cold eyes. He was seeing her not as the discarded first wife, but as the partner of a man who could command this kind of power. "It seems you have a much better grasp of strategic alliances." He didn't wait for a reply. "My office will call your office on Monday. We'll discuss Singapore." He turned and walked away, leaving a trail of implications in his wake. He hadn't just come to talk business. He had come to signal a shift in allegiance. Marcus's value had just plummeted, while Alina's had gone stratospheric. The noise, the pressing bodies, the weight of hundreds of eyes. It was suddenly too much. The air felt thick and suffocating. Alina's exhilaration curdled into a wave of anxiety. She felt like a specimen in a jar. The label suddenly changed from pitiable to priceless. She leaned towards Nathan, her voice a desperate whisper lost in the din. "Nathan, I can't breathe. Can we please go?" He looked at her, and all the amusement and cool command in his expression melted away, replaced by genuine concern. He saw the panic in her eyes, the slight tremor in her hands. Without a word, he nodded, placing a reassuring hand on her back. "Of course, let's get you out of here." He rose, and his sheer presence was enough to carve a small pocket of space around them. He gave his assistant a discreet nod, and she, without looking up from her tablet, gave an infinitesimal nod in return. The operation would continue without him. As they began to move towards the exit, Marcus intercepted them. He lunged from the side, blocking their path. The polished veneer was gone entirely. His face was a blotchy, furious red, his eyes wild with a mixture of rage and desperation. "You're not going anywhere," he hissed, his voice tight and venomous. He was directing his fury at Nathan, but his eyes were locked on Alina. "What was that? Some kind of sick joke?" "I found it rather amusing myself," Nathan replied, his voice dangerously quiet. He moved to stand slightly in front of Alina, a human shield. "Now, if you'll excuse us." "No!" Marcus's voice cracked. "This was my night, mine and Sabrina's. And you? You waltz in here with him?" He jabbed a finger towards Nathan. "Who even is he? Some billionaire you dug up to make me jealous? Is your pride really that pathetic?" He took a step closer to Alina, his face contorted in a sneer she knew all too well. It was the look he gave her when he was about to tear her down, to remind her of her place. I told you during the divorce you'd be nothing without me, that you had no ambition, no drive. So what is this? Did you think this grand, pathetic revenge fantasy would prove me wrong?" His words, meant to be daggers, instead acted as a catalyst. They didn't wound her. They cauterized the last of her old wounds. Everything he was saying, that she was nothing, that this was about him, that her only motivation could be a pathetic need for his approval, was the very script he had forced her to live by for years. And in that moment, she was done with it. She stepped out from behind Nathan's protective stance. She faced her ex-husband, not with anger, but with a profound, bone-deep weariness that gave way to a steel resolve. "You're wrong, Marcus," she said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it was clear and steady, cutting through his rage. "You're wrong about everything. You think this was about you. That's always been your problem. You think the entire world revolves around your ego, your ambition, your needs." She took a breath, feeling the ground solid beneath her feet for the first time in years. "You didn't just tell me I had no ambition. You actively crushed it. Every idea I had was silly. Every success was lucky. You told me I was nothing without you for so long that I actually started to believe it. You invited me here tonight not to share your happiness, but to witness my irrelevance. You wanted to see the ghost of your past, broken and sad, so you could feel like a king." She looked him directly in the eye, and for the first time, she saw him not as the powerful, intimidating man who had broken her heart, but as a small, insecure boy, terrified of being seen as ordinary. "But I'm not a ghost, Marcus, and you're not a king. You're just a man who is so terrified of his own inadequacy that he has to build a fortress of money and praise around himself." She gestured to the chaotic ballroom. "This isn't revenge. I'm so far past wanting revenge on you. This is just my life. A life you are no longer the main character of. You're not even a supporting character anymore. You're just part of the backstory." She delivered the final line with a quiet finality that was more devastating than any shout could have been. "So enjoy your fortress, Marcus. I truly hope it keeps you warm at night." Without another glance, she turned her back on his stunned, ashen face. She took Nathan's arm, a silent affirmation of their partnership. And together they walked. They moved through the grand ballroom, the sea of gawking, whispering guests parting for them, as if by magic. They walked past the towering cake, past the gift table where a line had now formed, past the grand entrance, and out into the cool, liberating night air. The valet, his eyes wide with newfound reverence, practically tripped over himself to bring the town car around. As they slid into the quiet, leather-scented interior, the heavy door thudded shut, sealing off the noise and the drama of the world they had just left behind. Elena leaned her head back against the seat, closing her eyes and breathing out a long, slow sigh. It was the sound of a weight being lifted, a chain being broken. "Are you all right?" Nathan asked, his voice a soft anchor in the silence. She opened her eyes and turned to him. A genuine, unburdened smile touched her lips. "I'm better than all right," she said, her voice filled with a quiet wonder. "I'm free." She looked at him, at the man who had orchestrated this insane, brilliant, life-altering evening. "Why, Nathan? Why would you do all that for me?" He looked at her, his expression serious, his gaze direct. Marcus Thorne and men like him believe that a person's worth can be measured on a balance sheet. He tried to define you by what he thought you lacked. I simply provided a rebuttal in the only language he was equipped to understand. He paused, his hand covering hers on the seat between them. His touch was warm and steady. "But the real reason is that I met a woman with an incredible eye for design, a sharp mind, and a quiet strength she didn't seem to recognize in herself. I didn't do this for you, Alina. I just created the circumstances for you to do it for yourself. All the power in that room tonight was yours. His words settled over her, a truth so profound it almost made her weep. He hadn't rescued her. He had simply held up a mirror and shown her the queen that had been there all along. As the car moved silently through the glittering streets of Los Angeles, Alina knew this wasn't an ending. It was a beginning, a new story on a blank page, waiting to be written. And for the first time, she was holding the pen. And that's how a single night changed everything. It wasn't about the money or the lavish gifts. It was about a woman reclaiming her power and realizing her story was her own to write. Marcus wanted to be the king of his own world, but he forgot that the most powerful people are the ones who don't need a crown to know their worth. Alina walked away that night, not with a vengeful heart, but with a free one.